So cool. Okay. I have 30 seconds. Catch my breath and stuff. Yes, thank you. I'm not late. Okay. I'm also very low though. Okay, how close to this mic do I have to do before people can hear me? Is this good? Awesome. Whew. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Hi everybody. Welcome to Welcome to Webcomics 101, the panel that I like to run to teach all of you guys the basics of what you need to do, what you need to know, to start a webcomic of your very own. So, quick introduction. Oh, that mouse is going to be on his head. What panel is this? Webcomics 101, I just said. If somehow you're not sure what a webcomic is, it's a comic that you can read online. And because I get this question very often, is it like Webtoon? Yes. Webtoons are webcomics. Webtoons are like a subtype. It's like, oh, you have a cat. Is it like a tabby? Yes, a tabby is a type of cat. Webtoons are types of webcomics, okay? Who the heck are you? Referring to me. Hi, I am Star. I am the TheStarfishface on all platforms. I am the writer and artist of a comic called Cast Off that's been running on Wednesday it will have been 9 years. So, been at it for a while. And then that wasn't even, I had my first webcomic that ran for 3.5. Been doing this for a while, one might say. But I have learned a lot in the decade plus I've been doing this, and so now my goal is to pass all of that knowledge on to you guys. And this is the part where I shamelessly self-plug myself. So this is my webcomic, it's called Cast Off, and there's a QR code for the website so you can read it. This is what I look like on a daily basis. This is just me going on Twitter and just being like, hey. Alright, I'll leave it up just half a second because I see like 1 or 2 thumbs up. It's going away in 3, 2, 1. I'll have this up again at the end of the panel so you guys are fine. Alright, so to start us off, why should you make a webcomic? Maybe if you're not sure, maybe if you're thinking about it, maybe you're not sure if webcomics are right for you. Here's some reasons why you should make a webcomic. Number 1, webcomics are amazing practice. At both like writing and drawing and visual storytelling, and also learning how to scream about your projects from the heavens so that people will actually read them. It's good practice for all that. Number 2 is good for building discipline, because nothing builds discipline like having readers who depend on you to update your comic regularly. So, you have people who are reading your comic and they want to find out what's happening, what is going to happen. That is good practice to keep yourself in that flow, right? Of constantly creating new stuff. It's also very good for having a portfolio. If one of your goals is to be a professional artist, having a large volume of work as a webcomic is very beneficial, especially if you're trying to get into comics professionally. It's also good because it lets you see the progression of your skills over time. How many of you guys have read a comic where the art on page 1 is like, but then you see the art like 5 years later and you can watch as the artist gets better over time. It's cool, right? Yeah, I'm seeing lots of nods. Awesome. Also, the personal satisfaction you get from making a thing and then sharing it with the whole world is awesome. And you can make strangers cry over your original characters. And that's cool. That's not the main reason I'm into it. Also, it's just fun. It's fun. I promise. It's just fun. However, here's the next slide where I break your dreams a little bit. Here's some reasons why you should not make a webcomic. I say don't make a webcomic if you are getting into this only for this reason. If you're only wanting to make a webcomic to be the next Laura Olympus and be uber super duper famous, lower your expectations a touch. Because you probably won't get famous right away. It'll take a couple of years. You might never get famous, but that's okay because webcomics, the joy of them is that they are very indie, right? They're fun. Also, it's good to want to make money off of your comic, and there are many ways that you can. I will talk about that if I have time at the end. But if you are only getting into comics to make money, probably not going to be disappointed because usually people just make these for fun. Start out making it for fun, and if fame and money comes along the way, then that is great. Don't go into it just for these 2 reasons, right? Do it as a fun passion project, and if you can get something from it, then heck yeah. So should you make a webcomic? Yeah, I think so. You think can be hard and stressful, but the satisfaction you'll get from creating something awesome overcomes all the bad part, in my opinion. It's a great way to make friends, improve your art and writing, and learn a lot of cool stuff. Webcomics are great. And here's all the excuses that people give me why they haven't made a webcomic yet. I'm calling out everyone in this room. So I hear so often, my art isn't good enough yet. And here's the thing. Do you guys think that a professional tuba player got really good at playing the tuba by laying in bed at night and thinking about the tuba really hard? No! They played the tuba, and they made those little doot-doot noises until they stopped sucking at making the doot-doot noises, and they got better at the doot-doot noises. You want to get better at making comics? You have to make comics. You get better as you do the thing, right, gang? Yeah? So this first excuse, busted. I need like the Mythbusters graphic on these. Also, another one I hear is, webcomics are too much effort. Everything takes effort. Getting out of bed this morning took effort. My cats were crawling all over me. And just getting them off of me took a lot of effort. Everything takes effort. If you want to make a comic, you gotta be able to do it. Ties into the next one. But I don't have any motivation. So here's the thing. How many times has this happened to you? You're laying in bed at night and you're just thinking about your life, and all of a sudden, the webcomics fairy descends through your ceiling and is like, here, I brought you some motivation. And then you're like, thank you, webcomics fairy. Now I can make my dream webcomic a reality. How many times has that happened to you? Exactly. Webcomics fairies will not descend from the heavens to give you motivation. It is much better to learn discipline and be able to do it even when he's like, oh, it's a boring page. Oh, I'm not feeling super inspired. You got to learn to do it anyway. And that's true of like anything, right? I hate doing the dishes. But it needs to get done, right? Discipline. I also hear a lot of people saying, I'm working on the story, but it's not perfect yet. It's not ever going to be perfect, so again, just like relax a little bit. The thing about webcomics is they take a lot of time. You can kind of be working on editing the story as you are writing it, right? It's good to have like an outline. It's good to know kind of where you're going. But as far as like, I haven't perfected this one line of dialogue in chapter 17 yet, and you haven't even started chapter 1, guys, come on. You can figure it out as you go. There's so much where I'm just like, oh, well, that's a plot hole in my comic. I'll figure it out. And I did, is the thing. Like 4 years later, before I got that scene, I was like, oh, this works. And you just write it in. Like, it's fine. Don't worry so much about it. And then the last excuse I have is, but I don't have time. And like, yeah, that's fair. But you should try to make a webcomic anyway, because it's fine. In short, just do it. Just do it. Can you tell what year I originally made this PowerPoint in? Anyway, so now that we've all decided that we want to make a webcomic, right? So, I want to make a webcomic, but I don't know where to start. Don't worry, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I'm here for everybody in this room. So, first you kind of want to think about what you want your webcomic to be. Because what exactly format your webcomic takes is going to affect how you make it, right? So, is your comic going to be a gag-a-day comic strip, like Garfield, or Calvin and Hobbes, or like whatever these are not webcomics, but you get the idea. Is it going to be a page-by-page long format comic, which this is what my comic is. It's like if you took a graphic novel and you just put one page up every week or so. Is it going to be an infinite scroll type that Webtoon and Tapas are famous for? Or is it going to be something else entirely? Like, I personally don't have experience with this one, but like Homestuck Day was yesterday, I think. It's like, that one was just like single images and animations and chat logs. It's like, that's still a webcomic. That's cool. I wouldn't have thought of doing it like that, but if you have an original idea, webcomics are an amazing medium for them. But yes, how you present your comic will impact how you write it, how often you upload new pages, etc. So it's kind of a good idea to think about this early on. This next step is going to be more for longer form stories. So if you're doing more of a like comic strip type thing, this is less relevant, but it's still stuff I want to talk about. Before you start drawing your comic, I argue you should always write your comic first, obviously. I recommend starting with a script or at least have a basic outline of what you want to do. Also, I wanted to note here that if you're doing a comic professionally and you're like collaborating with other people, there's usually a format for the script you're expected to write in. Webcomics, it's usually just like you. Unless you're working with a writer or an artist, you only have to write in scripts that make sense to you. You don't have to force yourself to use a format you don't like. So for example, this is how mine usually start. I take each chapter and I break it up by like the key beats. and I just write those down. This is like my basic outline, right? This is not spoilers, by the way, these chapters came out like 5 years ago. And so then, this is what my scripts look like, is I take the first letter of each character's name, and I just write their dialogue, and first letter of dialogue, I have stage directions. I occasionally put, like, if I have a specific shot in mind, I'll usually detail it in the script, but I break it up by pages like this, and so this script is for that page. So you can kind of see how A becomes B, right? But this is the format that I use. You don't have to use this format. You can use whatever the heck format you want. I'm just providing you guys with an example. So, like I said, if you are not exactly sure of the exact order of operations, I do recommend starting with an outline first. And so this is kind of like a basic outline structure. You start your story, you have some kind of introduction, and then the inciting incident happens, and then because of the inciting incident, the next thing happens, and then because of that, until you get to your finisher, right? And also something that I just had last night, because I'm a story nerd, and this is the kind of stuff that gets me really excited, is try to link your story together with because statements rather than and then statements. And I know you guys are probably looking at me and you're like, what the heck is this crazy lady up here talking about? I'm gonna explain it. So, this is an example of a story that is driven by and then statements, right? So, Bob lives a peaceful life in his small village. Then, he leaves his hometown to go on an adventure. And then he meets another traveler. And then the traveler teaches him how to fight with the sword. This is like, okay, it works. We don't know why Bob left his village. We don't know why he wants to learn how to fight. Bob feels like he has no agency. Bob feels like he is being told where to go by an omnipresent writer. Bob has no agency here. Bob is just doing what the writer tells him to. However, we can make this better. Bob lives a peaceful life in his small village until one day, a dragon attacks and burns his village to the ground. So that's our inciting incident, right? Because the dragon destroyed his village, Bob leaves town to get revenge on the dragon. But because he leaves town, he gets attacked by monsters. And because he gets attacked by monsters, a traveler rushes in to fight the monsters to save him. And then because the traveler saved him, Bob asks the traveler to teach him how to fight with a sword, to defend himself. Bob has agency. We understand why Bob is doing the things that he is doing, right? This is a more compelling narrative than this, right? I see a lot of emphatic head nodding. We're all good here. I'm a writing nerd. This is what excites me. So I just I'm going to put this in the PowerPoint in the last minute, like 10 p.m. last night. I'm like, ah! But yeah. So just some general tips for writing. Don't start at the beginning. You don't have to. I see so many people get caught up on writing where they're like, oh yeah, I have this great idea for a comic. I don't know where the story is going to start. You don't have to start there. You can just write the stuff that you're excited about now and then work it in later. I remember a script for a comic scene that I just posted like last year. I wrote 6 years ago because it was a scene that I was like so excited about. I just wrote it completely isolated and I was like, I know exactly how I want this scene to play out, so I'm just going to write this now and it's not going to be relevant for like 6 more years. I have another chapter coming up. I haven't even gotten to drawing it yet, but I was so excited I knew exactly how I wanted this chapter to play out. I wrote it like 10 years ago. Almost before the comic was posted online, I scripted this chapter. You don't have to start at the beginning. You can start with the stuff that excites you, and then figure out how to link them together. If you are having trouble with plot holes, I highly recommend writing down the problem and taking notes on it as you work towards fixing it, because in my opinion, problems are a lot easier to solve if you can actually look at them. Stare them down in a Word document, right? Also, don't stare at an empty Word document and expect inspiration. We talked about the webcomics fairy. She is not coming for you. She does not exist. You need to let her go. If you are stuck on writing, go outside, take a walk, touch some grass, look at some dogs. Inspiration will come to you once you get the blood flowing, all right? My neighbors all think that I am a crazy person because I like to pop in my headphones and take laps around my neighborhood and just mutter under my breath while I'm trying to figure out dialogue for a scene, and they all think I'm a crazy person. But my dialogue is so much better for it. Oh, get out of here, Bob. I'm done with you. Okay. A good idea before you start is know how your story ends, because it is easier to go somewhere if you know where you're going. Also, if you know what the ending is, you can drop in little bits of foreshadowing all through the story and drive your readers crazy! Which is my personal favorite thing to do. Anyone who has read my comic knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'm seeing some nods! Alright, another thing is write down inspiring something else, because the worst feeling is like being at the grocery store and choosing what flavor of wheat thins you want. And you're like, oh, I just had a really cool idea for a line of dialogue. I will remember it later. And then like 3 hours later, you're just like, all I remember is my wheat thins. So don't be that guy. Don't be me last week. If you like to write on the go, like I do, if I have an idea, I just like whip out my phone and jot it down. Programs like Evernote, Google Docs, something you can access wirelessly is good if you can just like write stuff down in your phone. As if you're struck by inspiration to the wheat thins aisle, I recommend like having your scripts readily available to you. Also, make your neighbors and roommates think you're crazy. Read your scripts out loud. Please read your scripts out loud before you put the dialogue into the comic. Reading them out loud, tapping into your inner theater kid energy, and reading out your dialogue will make it so much easier to catch plot holes, weird dialogue. Why does he sound like that? Just like, people are going to be reading this. Read it out loud, listen to yourself, read it to other people. Make your neighbors think you're a crazy person. Anyway, this is my one request. My biggest request, you guys. Please, 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 please do not start with like 20 pages of lore. I don't care. My one exception to this is do not start with lore unless the lore is immediately, I'm talking about like next page, immediately relevant to what is happening in your comic. I don't need to know how the gods created the universe 1,500 years ago if you open the story and it has nothing to do with that. You can learn that as the story progresses. We don't need a history lesson to start your comic. Please, 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 please don't do this to me. Thank you. Okay, so what I I have is, how many, you don't need to see a raise of hands, I will be able to tell by the looks on your faces. How many of you have an idea for a webcomic that's been sitting in your brain for years and it's your magnum opus and you're so excited for it, you just really, really, really want to make it, but you haven't started yet because you're like, oh, it's such a big time commitment and it's going to take so long. I can see by the looks on your faces. If this is your first time making comics, I would recommend maybe not starting with that one as your very first time doing sequential art. Because your first comic is usually going to end up abandoned for one reason or another. Either you realize a chapter or two in that you hate how you did it, or you don't like the art style you drew it, or XYZ number of reasons. I recommend starting with a smaller project that you can finish easily just to get your feet wet, right? The first time you get in the ocean is not the time you should be going scuba diving, right? You know, learn how to swim and then go scuba diving, right? A shorter story is more manageable and you'll be able to learn a lot that can be applied to larger future projects. And if you're thinking, I love my magnum opus so much though, I can't bring myself to work on anything else, write like a side story set in that universe with those characters, right? Like how two characters met, right? Like XYZ character finds a dog, and what do they do about the dog? And just like write just like a little short story, just a practice thing. You don't like, you can still use these characters, and even then, that's a good idea, because then it helps get people on, if you post it online, helps get people interested in when your actual magnum opus starts coming out, right? Right? You guys see what I'm talking about? Yeah? Advertising, marketing, it works. Also, keep it tight. Sprawling epics are all well and good, but when you are 500 pages deep into your comic and you realize you're only like an eighth of the way through the story, you might start breaking out in a cold sweat at 2 a.m. Keeping it short is a good idea, right? There's a phrase called kill your darlings, and it sounds extremely violent, but it's basically just like the idea of keeping your story to what's most important, unless you're into a 2,000-page epic long webcomic. Okay, let me give you some perspective. I've been working on Cast-Off for 9 years. It's 750 pages. And I have to do that sucker twice a week on average. It's a lot of work. I haven't even gotten to 1,000 pages yet. Short is good. We love short. Also, planning versus pantsing. This refers to writing stuff. Planning is like when you have everything in your story planned out meticulously. You know all the world building. You know everything that's going to happen from point A to point Z. Pantsing is when you're just like, you know the basics. What happens if you just rip this character's pants off in the middle of the scene? What happens? Go! It's more like character-driven. It's just kind of embracing the chaos, right? So figure out which one works for you and then roll with it. Don't try and force yourself to be a writer that you're not, right? Okay. Now it's time to make your comic. So, again, you kind of have to think about how you want to make it. Is it going to be traditional art, which is like hand-drawn on paper and scanned? Are you going to be using digital, which is what I mostly use, where you draw it in an art program like Photoshop or Paint or whatever. MS Paint, what, Clip Studio Paint. I'm very smart and speak English really good. Is it going to be in 3D? Because a lot of comics actually like use 3D software. They make their characters in 3D, and these people are stronger than I am. Or are you going to do it in full color? Is it going to be black and white? Are you going to do grayscale? Are you going to do like some crazy fourth thing that is a secret? Experiment with the art and find a style and method that you personally enjoy and that works for your story as well. Here are some of my software recommendations if you're not quite sure what to use. My personal favorite is Clip Studio Paint. That's what I've been using for cast-off for the last several years. It's basically the only art program I use anymore. It is a little bit expensive, but it does go on sale really frequently. So just if you don't want to pay full price, just like wait 3 months, it'll go on sale probably. We usually do it sales like at least twice a year, but yeah. Also, I wouldn't recommend Photoshop unless you already have the Creative Cloud subscription for whatever reason. Like if you have it through school, or if your dad has it, you just mooch off of his license. I don't know. But other than that, anything that Photoshop will do for you for specifically making comics, you can get in other software. But you know, if you have it, you can use it. Other options are, if you have an iPad, you can get Procreate. It's like $10. You only have to pay for it once. I use that for all my sketching. There's also Paint Tool Side, GIMP and Krita, I think are both free. So there's a lot of free stuff out there. You just gotta like kind of play around, see what works. So yeah, like I said, before you start your comic, experimenting is a good idea. Try drawing pages in a multitude of different ways. Figure out what works for you and also what works for your story. I made this joke on a stream once where if you're writing a neo-noir detective story, like super duper gritty action scenes, very dark stuff, you maybe don't want to draw it with like pastels. I mean, you could. I mean, the other way around is we came up with this story about Kirby, but it was drawn in the detective noir style, like super dark, like spot blacks. And I'm like, okay, well now I actually do want to read this thing. But yeah, you know, just like figure out kind of what works with your hands and what works with your characters and your story and how much you want to put into this, right? Yeah, pick an art method that you enjoy doing, and more importantly, doesn't burn you out. If you hate coloring with a burning passion, no one is holding you a gunpoint to like color your comic. You can do it in black and white, it's okay. Or if you're like me and you find drawing just in black and white a complete and total struggle, you can torture yourself by making a fully rendered, fully colored comic page twice a week. Because you just love purple so much. Anyway, I also recommend timing yourself. Keeping track of how much time it takes for you to draw each page. Because comics are a really big time sink. They're a really big time commitment. And if you can find a way to work smarter and faster and more efficiently, thank yourself in the meantime. And your wrist will also thank you. Carpal tunnel is a hell of a thing, you guys. Do not mess with that. Don't be afraid to use resources to help you work more efficiently. Custom brushes, 3D models, using reference photos, all of these things can be a huge help to speed up the comic making progress. I could totally make a panel entirely just about this. We ain't got time for that. So this is make the font big enough. Back up your files. Do not let your computer randomly getting fried destroy years and years and years of hard work. There is a story from art school where a guy was working on his senior film. He had his school film backed up on his home computer, an external hard drive, and the school's servers. In one day, the school servers just broke. They just didn't work anymore. He crashed his bike on his way home. The hard drive flew out of his backpack and shattered against a tree. He got home. His house had been robbed. He lost everything. Don't let that be you! Back up your files! I gave this its own slide because it's important. Here's some tips. Find friends to be your beta testers. If you've ever written fics before, beta is a pretty common term. You find some friends, you strap them to a chair, and maybe don't do that part, but you tell them about the story, you show them your scripts, you let them see pages in advance, because a lot of times outside eyes will help you catch things that you didn't notice, like plot holes, inconsistencies. Why is this dude's hair parted on this side on this page instead of the other side? Some other advice is step away between steps of comic making to stare at something else. It's not just good for, taking breaks and making sure that you're taking care of yourself. It's also good because sometimes you'll, intricately sketch out an entire page and then not realize until after you've gone and eaten a bagel and come back that, oh, I gave him 2 right hands on every single panel in this page. And if you had inked that already, that would be a pain. But while you went and got a bagel, after you sketched it, then you come back with your bagel and you're like, oh, okay, now I can fix this before I ink it and do the important stuff. Also, yes, take a break. Because carpal tunnel is a pain, literally and metaphorically. These are a couple of comic making resources. I could put more books in here, but I did not have a whole lot of space. Making Comics by Scott McCloud, if you have not checked this out, highly recommend it. It's a book about making comics written as a comic. So if this is like your first time getting into comics, this is a really good thing that's going to teach you a lot about like the visual medium. Like how to lay out pages, how to use panels effectively. It's just a good source if you've never made a comic before and you want to learn a little more about it. Also, this is just a personal pick, Save the Cat. It's technically a book about screenwriting, but a lot of the stuff you learn in this book applies to comics too. It's just a book about like good storytelling. I've read it, I love it, I personally think it's really interesting. Here's a couple of websites that have a lot of tutorials on there, and I just realized I missed an opportunity to shill myself. I have a YouTube channel where I post tutorials and stuff that I make about webcomics. But yeah, so I'll put a link for that at the end of the channel so I can show myself. Also, there's a couple of forums here that you can like go in. There's also Discord servers. Spider Forest is the group that I am part of. We have a Discord server where people can come in and talk shop, all that jazz. There's a lot of comic making resources out there, so it's a good idea to just like, kind of immerse yourself in those communities. So once you've made your comic, you gotta put it somewhere, right? It's comic, but you gotta put it on the web. You gotta make it a web comic. You have to shoot it into the web of the internet. I'm making like a spiderweb joke. I don't know if it's working. Call Spider-Man and be like, hey, you put my website online. And he's like, what are you talking about? So 2 options, main options for putting your webcomic online is you can build your own website or you can host it on a free comic making website. Building and hosting your own website is going to be more time consuming and it will cost you money to pay for like the domain and the hosting and all that stuff. But the side effect is you get full control over the looks and setup of your website. You can add as much to it as you want, you can make it look however you want, and you are constrained by the limitations of whatever platform you're going to be using. A free host like Tapas Webtoon, I'll have a list here in a second, they are free. And they come with a built-in audience. They come with users who use those platforms specifically coming there to read comics. So it's like built-in eyeballs. But they aren't as customizable as a site that you build yourself. So you kind of have to decide which is best for you. And I mean, you can do both. What I do is I have my main website that I post cast off on, but I also post it on Tapas and Webtoon just to grab the free eyeballs, right? Also, we're not just Tapas and Webtoon. There are a couple of other sites. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just some things that I use. DeviantArt should probably take off this PowerPoint. It's several years old at this point. I've seen people do it with Tumblr. I'm not sure that I would recommend it necessarily, but there are themes for Tumblr that you can use. Tapas and Webtoon and Comic Fury. I think like this little triangle right here could be your best bets. Comic Fury has the smallest audience, but it also lets you fully customize your little landing page. So it's kind of like a mix of both having your own website and posting platform. Tapas and Webtoon, you kind of have to do whatever they tell you to. And also, like, if you're trying to make a not safe for work comic, you're going to have to fight the demons there. But, they have, like, very large audiences that are kind of, like, built in, and so it's a good way to grab more eyeballs. If you're going to go the route of building your own comic site, these are some things that I recommend. I'm not going to go into every single one of these things in detail, but there's the page. If you want to, like, take a picture, just take some notes real quick. I recommend building an about page so that people can see, like, a synopsis, when the comic updates, a little bit about you. I recommend having some kind of archive so if people like leave off in the middle, it's easy for them to jump to the page they left off on. I like having a character page so I know who your dudes are. Navigation so that they can go to the next page or go back or what have you. Comments are fun. I would say they're optional, but they're good for, like talking to the people who are reading your stuff. I like to have a links page so I can promote other comics that I enjoy. Use social media, make sure those are on your websites, and an RSS feed. I know there's so many young people in here who don't know what an RSS feed is. before the internet was really popular. Learn about the dinosaurs. Use an RSS feed. So here's some tips about posting comics. If you can, I recommend launching the comic with your entire first chapter, or at very least a large chunk of pages, like 10, 20, etc. I think I did like 15 when I started. No, I did 18 when I started Cast Off. Prologue and then 5 more pages. So imagine this hypothetical scenario. You see an ad for a new webcomic, and you're like, oh, this seems interesting. I want to read this. You click on the website, you go to the website, there is 1 page. And it's like the cover of the first chapter. And you're like, this is doing nothing for me. And you leave and you never come back because it's just not interesting, right? However, imagine a second hypothetical scenario. You go to a webcomic, you see an ad for a new webcomic, and there's already like 20 pages. In like that time, you can introduce your main character, sort of kind of introduce the plot. Give them something to sink their teeth into, and they are far more likely to stick around and come back for future updates. Also, making pages in advance will kind of give you an idea of how often you can update, and it takes some of the pressure out, so I highly recommend it. I talked about this at the beginning. Don't expect your comic to get super popular right away. It takes time, like anything, to build an audience. And people generally won't get super duper invested until you're probably about 100 pages in. This is actually, it has a name, it's called the 100-page rule. Where generally it's like, once you hit that sweet spot of about 100 pages, that's kind of when people will really start getting invested, right? Okay, and then here's my tip. How often should you update? Doesn't matter as much as making sure that you are consistent about it. Because nothing is more frustrating than a comic with irregular, erratic updates. Pick a schedule that works for you and stick to it. And also, let people know when you're posting updates, right? Because usually I post the update schedule at the very top of my website. It's like, come back every Monday and you'll get a new page. Very easy to see. You want people to know this. Most comics try to update once a week or more. If you have less, you risk losing your viewers or not having people be as invested in it. Give them something to look forward to every week, and they'll return consistently every week. I also recommend being a few pages or updates ahead. This is usually called a buffer or a queue, like a buffer of pages. So if you have I just posted page 5, but I'm also drawing page 12 right now. And so it's like, okay, well, if I catch the flu or something, my comic can keep updating, and I have pages for the next couple of weeks while I recover from the flu, and then I can get back up onto it, and it's like nothing happened. Right? From your reader side, nothing happened. Key thing to remember, webcomics are a marathon. They are not a 100-meter dash. So do not burn yourself out. Webcomics are usually projects that will take you months to years to work on. Like I said, Cast Off, I'm like halfway through it, and I'm 9 years in. Do not work at maximum output constantly. You will die. It's okay to miss an update occasionally, but like I said, you should strive to be consistent, because that consistency is what's going to bring people back. If you have to miss an update, like you break your arm or something, that has happened to me. I was in a car accident and I broke my arm, and I was like, guys, comics gonna be on hiatus for a while. If you tell people that, they will understand. People are generally understanding if a comic needs to go on hiatus for whatever reason. But if you just dip off the face of the earth, you're just going to annoy people, and then they won't want to come back and read your story. Your readers will appreciate honesty. Like, I'm sure all of you guys, if you've ever read a comic and it has to go on hiatus for a while, if someone tells you, explains to you what's going on, you're more understanding of that, right? Versus if someone just dips and leaves for like 3 months and doesn't explain what happened. You know, treat your readers the way that you as a reader would want to be treated, right? Here's some additional tips. Be your own biggest fan. Honestly, of all the tips I gave, this is probably the most important one. Comics really can be a slog. There are pages that are not going to be fun to draw. There's going to be times when you are just like not in the mood, but you have to keep going anyway. Relying on other people to encourage you is a fast track to losing motivation and just quitting. Do not rely on outside gratification. You have to be so excited about your own comic that you just go feral thinking about it. And you take walks around your neighborhood, you rehearse future lines, and you make your neighbors think you're a weirdo. They already think I'm a weirdo. I live in Colleen. All my neighbors are military people. And I'm the artist! Woo! But anyway, other tip is save every nice comment you get. If you get a nice comment, it makes you feel the happy little butterflies in your soul. Take a screenshot of it, put it on a folder, save it on your desktop. Look at it when you get sad. I do this with, I don't do this quite so much anymore, but I remember when I was first starting in comics, I still have a folder on my desktop filled with like all these nice comments. And those can really help keep you going on the bad days when you're having them. Everybody has self-doubt days. Everybody has days when they think they suck. And having a little screenshot of stuff on your computer that's like, hey, here's all the reasons why you don't suck. It's very good for your soul, and I recommend it. Also, try your best not to compare yourself to other people. Your webcomic journey is yours and yours alone. The way you make webcomics is not going to look like Bob Webcomics, John Webcomics, or what have you. Like, all of these peers, you're all going to have different journeys to them. Don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to earlier versions of you. Are you proud of your own progress? Are you proud of how you have proceeded? If you aren't, how can you improve later? You know, like, don't look at John Webcomic and be like, oh, John Webcomic got interviewed on a podcast. I've never been interviewed on a podcast. He's so much cooler than me. Don't worry about John Webcomics. He's over there making johnwebcomics.com. I'm trying to make this joke land. It's not working. But yeah, so that brings us to the end of the panel. How much time do I have? That was only 40 minutes. Awesome, we can do a Q&A bit at the end, because I'm sure you guys probably have questions. But I will leave this up. If you want to learn more about making webcomics, I've got a whole freaking book about it. I am selling these upstairs. This is what happens when you get tired of only having an hour to do your presentation. You write a 200-page book about everything you know about making webcomics. This is my shill. Also, I have an ebook version if physical books are great for you guys. Also, that's my webcomic up there if you guys want to scan it. But we do have some time left over. I'm not sure exactly what time they're kicking me out of here. Is it 2? I think it's probably like right at 2. We have like a gap between panels. But if you guys have questions, I am open to them. Hand.
How do you help the readers whenever the readers start after the
inciting incident?
Like something happened and all the readers get to see right now is the characters leaving their house.
Okay. So what I recommend is there's a couple of different ways you can do this, right? One of the big things, this is why I recommend starting with like a chunk of pages instead of just one. Make your readers want to ask questions. Give them information, do not give them all the information. Give people exactly what they need to understand, but leave some little sprinkles. Leave like, okay, why is this like this? Why is this the thing that's happening? If you're able to grab the reader's intrigue, they'll be more likely to come back. Another way you can do this is the concept of the page turn, right? You don't have to do this on every single page, but leaving a page on like just a little tiny cliffhanger, just like a little cliffhanger on every single update will keep people coming back for more. Like, if anyone's ever read any manga by Junji Ito, he is exceptional at this. I'm seeing some nods. Excellent, my people. Where it's like, he writes a lot of horror manga, just for those who don't know. And he does this phenomenal thing where it's like, before you see the monster, there's always like a page of someone realizing that the monster is behind them. And the last panel on that page is the person turning to look at the monster. And you just have this beat of what's going to happen next. Do that with your webcomics. You know, it's like, you see the last panel and someone's turning to look at something, it's a little tiny cliffhanger that's going to make people want to come back the next time. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to have a horror creature on every single page, right? But you know, when you can, make people excited for the next update just with how you pace your pages. It's something that takes a little bit of progress, or a little bit of practice. Once you master it, you will have people begging you for the next update.
Just the right amount of confusion.
You don't want to confuse people, you want to intrigue people. You want people to ask questions. You want people to be curious. And usually how you inspire that curiosity is by hinting there's more things to come. And you're not going to see it if you don't stick around, right? Does that make sense? All right, who's next? I see a hand back there.
So this kind of relates to something you mentioned promoting on different platforms.
Yes.
Is there any way, like, you recommend to strike a balance between spreading yourself thin and posting to as many places as you can?
Yeah, so what I do is I cheat. This is not something that's for everybody, but I know for me, because like my art is my full-time job and I kind of have to be chronicling online a little bit, I also hate social media. Hate that I have to work with it, hate that I rely on it for my paycheck, all this jazz. So the way I get around using it is I have a scheduler. I schedule posts in advance, like a month in advance. Because what I can do is I can just sit down. I usually do this like every Sunday is my admin day. Is I just sit down and I have a program. I think I didn't do this part because this is my secondary. Here we go. Yes. So this is my scheduler. This is a secondary PowerPoint I usually also run, but it's like the 102 version of this panel. They only approved me for one for this con, but I keep them in the same PowerPoint so I can reference back to them if I need to. So later.com is the service I use. I think their free version only lets you do like 5 free posts a month, but if you pay for it, it's like $100 a year, which I know might be out of some folks' budget, but if you can budget for it, this is the only reason I still post on Twitter and Instagram, because I can pre-schedule posts like way in advance and just not even think about it. I can just let my social media run itself, essentially. And it like lets you save captions. So you can just like copy paste, like whenever I do comic updates, I usually just have like important links. I'll just type like a little witty caption, and then I'll just like have the pre-saved like hashtags and URLs and stuff that I'm posting. This just lets me not think. My goal is to think about social media as little as possible. And this is how I do it. This is what their interface looks like. So you can like upload pictures that you want to post, and you can just it's a drag and drop calendar essentially. And it makes my life so much easier. Hashtag not sponsored. But yeah, like Later is not the only one of these. It's just the one that I like. There's others that you can use. I know like Hootsuite I think is one. Buffer is another one. Yes. There's several out there, so just like try them, see which one works for you. They let you post to like multiple platforms. So this one does Instagram, Twitter. They also just recently added YouTube is one. TikTok, it auto posts to TikTok for me, Pinterest, and it just does all those. I never look at them anymore, I just let this post for me. And it's delightful, because I don't have to think about it. But yeah, does that answer your question? Okay, cool. Next. Yes. No, that's not an answer. Anybody else? Yes. Hi.
Keep yourself from getting too like ambitious for your comic.
When you find out, tell me. So the question was, how do you keep yourself from getting too ambitious? I think a good goal is just like, try to do the bare minimum. But over time, your bare minimum will get bigger as you get more confident in your skills, right? So just like, an important thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that comics and full illustrations are not the same thing. You do not and should not make every single panel of your comic a full illustration, right? Like you should not be 100%ing every single panel that you make. Because if you think about it, people are only going to look at each panel for maybe 5 seconds. And so it's just like kind of learning to rein yourself in. Of like, no one's gonna notice if this pixel is slightly too far to the left. Another thing that's like tangentially related is I recommend never zooming in more than 200% on your light thing. If you zoom in too far, it's really easy to get lost in the weeds. Stay zoomed out, focus on the big picture, not the itty bitty pixels, right? But yeah, it's hard, but it's just like kind of learning to say F it is like honestly a really good attitude to have, because it's like no one's gonna care if this panel is not perfectly meticulously colored. Just put something there, and if it bothers you, you can come back to it later, right? But sometimes you just need to finish the page. And that I think is a perfectly good attitude to have. And if you're looking at me and you're thinking, I was like, oh, this girl doesn't know what she's talking about. Who's made comics for like 12 years? Sometimes you just gotta learn to say, it's fine. It's fine. And you just post it and you move on. Because like, we're all our biggest critics, right? So sometimes you just gotta learn to say, it's fine, and move on. Does that answer your question? Okay, who's next? Yes?
What's been your favorite method of promoting your webcomics over the years?
I love this this question because I have a very new answer for this. This is going to seem completely unrelated. I promise it is not. It is completely related. So actually, I have a graph for this. Yeah. So I'm prepared. So this is very inaccurate because this is from several years ago. So I have a new form of promotion for my webcomic that has come to me within the last year. And I know some people I have already talked to because I've talked to them at my panel. It's none of these. But if you look at my stats now, there is a pie slice. It's like 60, 50% of where my readers came from. Anybody want to guess?
Patreon.
It is not Patreon. It is YouTube. It sounds so weird. I promise. If I could log into my Google Analytics right now, I could tell you the exact day that one of my first YouTube videos went viral. Because it's just like, my page views had been stuck like this for 7 years. Like, it went up at like a 3-degree tilt over the time. And then there's just like, January 2023, when my first video on YouTube went viral. Boom! And then, it surged for a couple of days, and it dropped off a little bit, but it dropped off like 200% higher than it was. And then I had another video go viral in April. Boom! And then it settles like way higher. It's so weird. But honestly, starting a YouTube channel where I talk about my art and talk about the stuff that I'm doing, I barely even talk about the comic. I just casually mention it in some of my videos. And so for those who are not familiar with my YouTube channel, I'm a YouTuber. So I have an art and story time channel that I do where I tell stories, and the B-roll footage I use in the background is speed paints of me drawing. And a lot of times I'll use art from my webcomic, or I'll do speed paints of me working on comic pages just as the background footage while I'm telling these stories. And I usually take a couple seconds near the start of every video to talk about the art I'm drawing. And so I'll say, hey, by the way, if you're interested in what I'm drawing, these are characters from my webcomic, and you can read it at such and such place, links in the description. And it's honestly been the best thing that I have ever done for my art career in general. Has been YouTube. Because I did the Twitter grind. I did the Instagram grind. I was a TikTok girly for 4 years and hated every second of it, but didn't realize I hated it until I started YouTube. And I'd like to say that YouTube is, TikTok is the old toxic boyfriend that hated you and just kept dating you because you were convenient and would occasionally throw a viral video at you. But we're just constantly fishing for something from TikTok, because TikTok has the potential to make your stuff go viral. You just have to keep shooting stuff into TikTok until it gives you what it wants. Maybe once every 6 months. Yeah. People know what I'm talking about. And then I started YouTube, and YouTube's just oh yeah, we'll keep showing your videos to people even though your videos are 3 years old. And yeah, you can post hyperlinks in the descriptions of your videos, so that people don't have to do you don't have to do the link in bio song and dance that I hate so much. I hate link in bio nonsense so much. But YouTube is the new boyfriend YouTube has its own set of problems, but YouTube's the nice boyfriend who reaches the bare minimum and has hyperlinks and lets people click on things and just continues to show your videos to people after 4 hours. And also you get to make silly videos where you scream about the time you got stabbed once, and everybody loves that. I'm not kidding, that's my first viral video, was talking about how I got stabbed in high school. It's a very funny story. I won't tell it here, you can go watch it on YouTube. I made a whole video so I don't have to be, so now you're interested, right? And in that video, I'm drawing some art from my webcomic. So hey! But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'm a YouTube fangirl now. I think it's everybody start a YouTube channel. It's so much fun. I know it's not for everybody, but that's personally my new favorite thing. It's just telling weird stories and posting them on YouTube, and then also here's a side order of my webcomic, go read it. And then I'd say that half of my current readers found me through YouTube. And considering I've been doing this for that long, that's wild that most of my readers found me in the last year. So, yay.
Better late than never.
Yeah, right? Screw you, TikTok, I found somebody better. All right, next question. Yes?
I hope this is a format. Do you consider yourself
successful, and how do you define success, and when did that happen for you?
I actually do have a very good answer to this. For me, my definition, there's like several tiers of success, right? Like, imagine it as a staircase, right? It's like every time you meet a new goal, that's a new level of success that you are getting to, and that's exciting. For me, realizing that it's like, oh, this is actually something, was when I was making enough through just the webcomic to pay for my house. Because, I mean, I'm not saying this to brag, I'm just saying it's like, I, within the last year, started making enough money on Patreon that it is now paying all of my bills. And the Patreon is mostly for my webcomic. So, like, that's my definition of success because that's where I am right now. If you ask me that question in 6 months, the answer might be different. If you asked me that 6 years ago, it would be that I have people who read the comic at all. Right? Like, for a while, my definition of success was if I can get 5 comments on each update, that is a success story to me. If I can look at my Google Analytics page and I'm seeing that I'm getting like at least 100 page views a day, that is success to me. If I am able to just keep the comic going, sometimes that's enough success for you. Once I started getting offers of people to do fan translations into other languages, that was a new step of success because that was so freaking cool. There's French people reading my comic now because someone's translating it for me. I don't speak French, but I'm glad they're having fun. Baguette, etc. I have a friend who's French Canadian. He hates when I do that, so I keep doing it. But yeah, it's like there's going to be success is not one thing. Success is a lot of little things that stack up over time, right? And I think that thinking about it as one thing, imagine it's like trying to jump up to the top story of a building and there's no stairs, right? But that's not how you get up, that's not how you ascend a building. You take it one stair at a time, right? And so I think if you're going for that success, it's fine. But you know, just like take the little victories, take the little successes, celebrate your achievements when you get them, right? So I consider myself successful because that is the current stair of success that I'm on. But like, if you ask me this in a year, the answer will probably change because it's constantly changing, right? And that's how we do an art career, is constantly changing and everything's fun. I'm a very sing-songy person, I'm sorry, the energy is a little too much, but I'm not gonna stop, so deal with it. Okay, any other questions? Yes?
So, you've been doing it for 9 years.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank
Is there any trends that you've noticed over the years that, like, okay, this is an old thing that no one does anymore, how very nostalgic, or a new thing that you're trying to pay attention to and be like, okay, I've got to watch that?
So I see new trends and I largely ignore them because sometimes the new trends annoy me and I'm like, I feel the old creeping into me sometimes, but like, I know that some people prefer this as a format. I cannot get behind the infinite scroll thing that webtoons do. I know it's good for reading it on your phones, but my priority is like a fun reading experience, and I like to play with my pages. I like to have fun page layouts, and if I'm restricted to one panel wide, it's boring. I don't want to do it. And I know that like some people will like take their pages, they'll draw them like a graphic novel page, and then they'll like grab each panel and stack them on top of each other. And I tried doing that once and I got bored and I didn't like it, so I stopped doing it. When I post my comic pages on Webtoon, I post them exactly how they look on all the other websites, and I occasionally get comments of people like, why don't you draw this like a normal Webtoon? And I'm like, it's not in Webtoon. Next question. He's like, you don't like it, you don't have to read it. I didn't make this for Webtoon. I didn't make this for you. I made it for me. Also, I have a major beef with Webtoon that we do not have time to cover. I have so many assorted beefs with Webtoon. I could do an entire other panel about this. The very, very truncated version is that they don't respect the people who are working for them. They don't respect the people who put their comics on their platform and have allowed them to be this successful. And also they stopped paying me, so I'm like, okay, well, screw you guys, whatever. Literally the only reason I'm still posting on Webtoon though is because people will come up to me at conventions and be like, is it on Webtoon? I'm like, begrudgingly, yes. But yeah, so there are trends. I kind of just stick to what works for me, right? Because the thing is, if you chase every single trend, you're going to lose sight of yourself. And like, if doing things a certain way is hurting you, then it's worth examining how you could potentially change it. But like I said, I don't bow now to Webtoon just because Webtoon is the new hot thing, right? And I am doing just fine without it. So it's like, if you think a trend is interesting and you think it could benefit you and it's not going to take you too far out of your comfort zone, you can try it. But I wouldn't chase trends just for the success. I would chase what makes you comfortable and what you want to do. And if a trend happens to benefit you and you can make it work, then that's fine. But the thing about trends is they're short and webcomics are long, right? That's like the easiest way I can put it, right? Is that if you're in this for the long haul, you can't chase every single Tom and Susie who thinks they have the next big thing, right? You have to decide your quest yourself, and then decide how many side quests you want to take. But you shouldn't take like every single thing that comes your way, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm good with that Webtoon. I found a lot of
Maybe I'll make a video about it. Enough people have asked me for one. Okay, I've got time for like.
A YouTube video about your Webtoon brand.
People have been asking for it. I might have to do it, but I'm gonna get a lot of Webtoon fangirls and fanboys being like, "What are you talking about? I love Webtoon." And I'm saying, "You're part of the problem. Learn what an RSS feed is, small child. You do not cite the old magics to me, which I was there when they were written." Anyway, next question. I have time for like one or two more. Yes.
Can you kind of describe, what your production was in your first year compared to, the process of making the comic? How did it get easier, or, how did you learn compared to what you did
Yeah,
now?
absolutely.
Because, what was your production like? How many pages were you able to do first year?
So, with my very first webcomic, I did not have a schedule when I first started. I just made pages when I felt like it. And it was because I started my very first webcomic right after graduating high school, and I had it all summer, and I was bored. And so I just made pages, and they were finished when they were finished, and I would post them like as soon as I finished them, and people hated it. Because they were like, "I never know when you're going to post a new page. Can you have some kind of schedule so I know when to check again?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." So a year into it, I started, I would dedicate every Saturday. I would sit down in the morning, and I would sit down and I would basically work until a new page was done. And then as soon as I finished, I would post a new page on the website, and then I would be done until the next Saturday. And so it's just like Saturdays were comic days. They were also Pokemon Club days at my college. So I would usually take my laptop with me to Pokemon Club, and I'd be working in the background, and then occasionally playing Pokemon. But that was my schedule for a really long time. And then when I started, so the idea is that I have specific days that I just work on the comic. Like Mondays and Tuesdays for me right now, those are comic days. And a comic page then took me about the same time as a comic page now. The difference is that over time, you learn the programs better. You learn the shortcuts that are going to help you finish things faster. You learn effectively, you learn how to get faster, basically. So I can show you, I actually brought some of my first webcomic. I have the old books. They're so bad, but I brought them with me. A page of my old webcomic would take me 6 or 8 hours, and it looked like garbage. And now I have a page that takes me 6 or 8 hours, and it looks awesome. And it's just about learning how to use your time effectively and also improving your skills as you go, right? And so the process looks pretty similar. What changes is the level of skill, if that makes sense. Okay, I think I have time for one more. Okay, I saw your hand first.
Does it make any sense to publish both on the web and in print?
Absolutely. I am gearing up to do a Kickstarter for my first webcomic, or for Cast-Off here in the next couple of months is what I'm planning on doing. I've been procrastinating for several years because printing scares me. But yeah, a lot of people, their big goal is to eventually put their comics in print. So I would say absolutely, if you have a comic and you want to print it, then print it. But the idea of putting it on the web is it's free, and that's how people discover it, right?
And to follow up, why haven't you, or maybe you have submitted it to a traditional publisher or a larger publisher?
I have a whole story we don't have time for it. When I was making this book, a publisher reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want to publish that." And I was like, "Cool, let me finish my Kickstarter first." And then it ghosted me for 6 months. And then I realized that doing it self-published, I was making 10 times as much as I would make with a traditional publisher. And no one's ever reached out to me with a contract that I thought was good enough. So I was like, I'm just going to keep doing my own thing. And if anybody wants a piece of this, they need a good contract for it. So that's my reason personally, is I'm stuck up and I'm doing just fine by myself. But it means that I have power with negotiation if anybody ever comes at me. So, that's my personal reason. Okay, I think I'm selling these upstairs.